Happy November, and what a happy November we've got. A long way to go until the tournament, but so much firing up here as we welcome you into another episode of Six Rotations, brought to you by SNA Sports, better equipment for a better game. He's Mick Haley, I'm Daniel Gilman, and there is so much to talk about and so little time. Over the next few weeks, we are going to continue to creep forward towards that Final Four in Columbus, and today is a Columbus-centric episode. The NCAA Division I Volleyball Committee came out with their top 10 rankings on Sunday night in the UCLA win over Washington, and we've got the chair of the committee, Sherene Brantley, breaking it down with us, talking through the regions and the decisions and the first four teams that didn't quite make that top 10. And then we've got a couple people who know winning. It's Mac Podraza, the All-American setter's mom, Chris Podraza, who is from Ohio, a Minnesota Volleyball Hall of Famer, and a huge, huge volleyball fan, to talk Ohio volleyball and the area with us, followed by a great in Morgan Hentz, who is going to bring to life the meaning of fighting for a Final Four. She's done that a few times, Mick, but we've got to start this off with our top 25, as we always do it. And while it may not have as much meaning this week as other weeks because of the NCAA bringing in their top 10, we can kind of make a couple comparisons as we bring up our top 25 now in its full entirety, Mick, as we've got something special today where we're kind of banging through it. Texas stays 1. That's got to be the big story off the top. It stays Texas 1, Louisville 2. Wisconsin drops with the loss to Purdue. And how about the big drop from Nebraska from 6 to 9? You know, even from us who may not be the biggest Nebraska fans, quite a big tumble there for the Huskers who finally lost their first conference game.
Well, they've had some trouble winning at home, and that's very unusual for Nebraska. So I think it's okay to question where they are right now. And part of the toughest part of their schedule is coming up here at the end. And so Nebraska is going to earn their spot on the poll. And I believe if they're as good as the fans think, they'll earn that spot, whatever it is that they think they should be. But right now, having them down is not something that shouldn't happen. I think it's okay.
And looking at Texas, they did secede 8 first-place votes to Louisville, so some of the coaches are starting to turn on it. But I think this weekend will answer all the questions because you've got 1 versus 10, Texas versus Baylor in Waco this weekend. So we'll leave all of our Texas and Baylor discussions to next week when we know a little bit more about those two teams. Kentucky looked very good without Maddie Skinner. They demolished Tennessee. They stick at 5, maybe deserving to be a little bit higher, depending on what region of the country you're talking to. But Mick, when we look at this top 25, right before we get to the top 10 reveal here, walk me through some of the lower sections of our rankings. Minnesota starting to turn around. They seem to win whenever they're doubted most. And maybe the oversight is UCLA at 13. I think maybe the Bruins, after sweeping Washington, should get a little bit more love, no?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think the Bruins have been consistently getting better, and they've changed their lineup as they brought these young kids in, and they're very athletic, and they're really hitting the ball well. I wanted to say one thing about Louisville, though. I'm kind of a Louisville fan right now, even though I'm living here in Austin, Texas. And
Aren't we all? They're so fun to watch.
Yeah, I think Texas is terrific, but Louisville has played the teams. If you look at the body of work, they scheduled to earn, I believe, the number 1 spot right now. If Texas beats Baylor, and there's no guarantee of that, but if Texas were to beat Baylor, Louisville still has played the body of work. So 1 or 2, I can live with both of those at 1 or 2 right now. They're both tremendously good. But as we move down, I think Minnesota could be the scariest team going into the tournament because as we saw, Winnis went off for 22 kills in this match against Nebraska. And Winnis is not a 22 kill player. She can get you 12. She can get you 14 on a real good night. 22, she had to be outrageously good. And Samity's going to get you 20 every night. So
certainly a hot take, but it's a good one there. We did a little poll who should be the number one team for now. And Louisville got 54% of the vote, while Texas just got 46%. So that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. Florida, Tennessee, both sitting there in the 20s. Illinois jumps over Pepperdine and the Fighting Illini, who, in my opinion, feeling pretty safe as that final bubble team. The question is, will the Big Ten get 6 or maybe 7? And that kind of falls upon some of the other conferences to see where they may grab some at-large bids. A little bit of a review here in the Pac-12. Arizona and Arizona State beat Stanford, who didn't have Lugay, Kip, or Minor. So the shorthanded Cardinals fall twice. UCLA pulls off a big comeback and beats Washington State in 5. Washington State does bounce back to beat USC, as it was definitely a weekend in the Big Ten that had people making big decisions, right? And we made a little bit of a mistake last week. We said the match was in Wisconsin when it was in Nebraska. And listen, we heard you. We're humans. We get it. But Wisconsin played like it was in Madison, and they dominated in Devaney. Purdue and their freshman Raven Colvin with 11 blocks to just wake up Wisconsin, right? It almost felt like the Badgers thought it was going to be a 2 p.m. start, and it was a 12 p.m. start. And before they realized it and started to sink in, the Boilermakers were riding high with that massive crowd in Holloway.
I'll make
Illinois,
a prediction.
go ahead.
I'll make a prediction right now that Big Ten is going to get 7 teams, and Illinois is going to be the 7th. And I haven't been an Illinois fan. I really felt they were underplaying, but they have upped their game, and they're beating the teams they need to beat. They have a win over Purdue. They have a win as they keep beating these teams coming up. The committee can't leave them out. They're going to be in, and Penn State's going to be in. They're not going to drop Penn State because of the quality of their schedule. So I say 7 teams for the Big Ten. I think the Pac-10 could be in trouble.
Yeah, it's looking like that might be a situation. The ACC staying strong. Georgia Tech swept UNC. They beat NC State. Georgia Tech has a huge weekend this weekend with Miami and Florida State. Notre Dame lost to Duke, which really crushed the Fighting Irish. And as we talk ACC, let's bring up our top 10 that we're going to talk to Sherene Brantley about in just a few minutes. And this is the big thing. Louisville gets the number 1 spot. They jump over Texas, according to the NCAA Division I committee, and what we will discuss as the regional advisor committees. So it's not that these committee members are looking at everything. They've got their own regional advisors that they have votes, and they all make decisions. The rankings came out as of Saturday, I believe she said, or Friday. So the weekend stats of Wisconsin losing, you see them at 3. That's not affecting the Purdue loss. So maybe we can see Wisconsin and Pittsburgh switching, maybe Wisconsin even falling below Kentucky if we want to speculate. But the big thing here, Mick, and this is why I wanted to bring ACC talk into it, Georgia Tech snags that 9 spot. And there are a couple notable teams like Purdue and BYU that didn't quite get into the top 10.
Here's the big thing about that. If the committee feels that Georgia Tech is that strong, and I don't think they're top 10, I think they're real good, but I don't think they're top 10. But if they are top 10, they're going to carry Miami and Florida State into this tournament.
Certainly.
Because Miami and Florida State, Miami 10-2 in the conference has been beating everybody, but not a good schedule. Florida State has had a pretty good schedule, but has only beaten Florida, and Florida struggled. So we look at the ACC, Louisville, Pitt, Georgia Tech. If they're all considered to be top 10, then they're going to carry the rest of their conference in, and that'll be the most teams the ACC's gotten in a long time.
Yeah, and Miami has one last chance against a top 25 team in Georgia Tech this weekend to kind of secure their fate. But should they fall, things might get a little testy down there in South Florida. Nebraska and Ohio State kind of married there at 6 and 7. And I mentioned it, Texas versus Baylor this weekend. I'm not sold on Baylor. If they can't win one of these matches here at home this weekend, in my opinion, Mick, they're not deserving of a top 16 seed when their non-conference wins are the notables against Minnesota and Florida. But we can let this weekend kind of tell the story here in Waco. What do you think about the Bears?
Well, I think the Bears are messing around. if you want to know the truth. I don't think their conference is very good. I think they keep switching the setters. They're doing all of this stuff. If all at once in the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season, they go with a standard lineup, they let everybody know what your position is, what we're going to do. I've seen this group play, and they're pretty darn good, led by Presley. They're really, really good when everything's firing. So I think they're okay. I worry about Ohio State, quite honestly. We watched them play when they were good, but they're having trouble scoring enough points right now. And so I throw that out there as just one thing to watch there. And can UCLA continue? I think they've earned the right to be in that top 10 right now, but now we'll see how they do with pressure on. Mac May had 18 kills this weekend in that win over Washington. That's a 3-set 18 kills, which means 6 kills per set. If she can deliver like that all the time, they can play against anybody.
That's pretty good there. So that'll kind of cover our Power 5 talk. Let's talk a little bit about some of these mid-majors. We talked a lot about LMU and whether they could live up to the Pepperdine match. Pepperdine swept them. So the Lions of Loyola Marymount and that 4th WCC bid, probably unlikely. Big news out of Long Beach State as they fired their head coach and associate head coach, Joy Mackenzie Furbringer. So that's interesting. And, you know, of course, your buddy, Brian Gimolero, brought so much success to that school. And now the Beach, you know, scrambling a bit. The Big West stays tied atop with Hawaii and UC Santa Barbara, both with that one loss. Santa Barbara escaped a upset bid by a good Irvine team. Florida Gulf Coast stays undefeated. They're 12-0 in the ASUN. And then Ball State, your Cardinals.
Yeah.
Stuck it to Bowling Green, gave Bowling Green their first loss of the season and lowers BYU's strength of schedule continually. They now sit at 112 because Bowling Green was one of those wins that they were holding high upon that RPI.
Yeah, and there's a chance for them to benefit, though, because those two teams, that conference will have a conference tournament. And
that's going to be fun.
And Bowling Green's on the one side, Ball State's on the other side. There's only about a 2-hour drive in between the two, and they're going to go in there. They're both 12-1 right now. So Bowling Green wins the conference. It's going to make BYU look good.
So coming up next, we've got Sherene Brantley. So excited to talk to her and have you guys all give us your opinions of how we maybe grilled the chair of the committee. I thought we did a pretty good job. And our Around the Arena's 3 interviews, all coming up next. Welcome into our Around the Arenas segment here on a special episode, breaking down the NCAA Top 10 reveal and looking forward to the NCAA tournament and the Final Four in Nationwide Arena in Columbus. And we're so happy to be joined by the committee chair, Sherene Brantley. Sherene, it's been a busy couple of days for you. How are you doing?
I'm good. A little tired, but good. Thanks for asking.
Fantastic. Oh, we've talked a lot about this top 10 now. So, you know, we've been teasing towards this interview and really excited to kind of break down the specialties and the intricacies. You know, one question I kind of wanted to ask right off the top, do you think Louisville gets the number 1 spot if they don't go undefeated, right? If they have 1 loss and Texas is the only undefeated team?
So that's a tough question to answer right now. Again, what we're looking at as committee is the body of work, right? So we're going to do the same analysis that we've done before, is we are going to be looking at the RPI, their stats, the top 10 wins, top 25, top 50, significant wins and or losses, among some other things. So at that time, if that were to happen, we would evaluate vigorously the same way we have before. So can't necessarily answer that question outright right now, but can sort of talk to you about the process that would go into making that decision, if you will.
Yeah, and let's talk about that process. Sherene had a great interview with Michaela Chester over at NCAA.com when she kind of went into the regional advisor committees, what they call the RACs, which I think a lot of the casual fans may not know too much about. So Sherene, I'd love for you to kind of break down how many people are coming together for this meeting, how many times you check in with the different regional advisors, and ultimately, where does the power lie, right? Does the Midwest get more power or the West Coast have a little bit more say? How does that work?
So first and foremost, where are the RACs, right? So the regional advisory committees, there's 5 of them. We have the East, the Midwest, the South, Southeast, and West. Each RAC has representatives from every conference. So every conference is represented on the RAC. And so as far as power, not so much power, everyone has a vote, if you will, in the regional rankings. And as I mentioned before on the previous, interview that you're referencing, we sort of ask them their opinions also on the national landscape, where they think people fit or teams fit. But generally, we're doing a lot of the in work for the region itself.
And then if in this being kind of the first tournament again, in between the COVID years, we got to see a lot of random mismatches in the first 2 rounds last year, which fans loved. You're not having Rice versus Texas every season. Are we back to kind of seeing regions take priority in terms of travel and budget?
So we have last year, as you talked about, we didn't have non-conference for quite a few folks. So that was always tough. There wasn't a lot of cross-pollination to sort of mismatch the common opponents, if you will. So that made last year's difficult. This year, we do have some common opponents. We do have non-conference competition going on, as you've seen, that has sort of caused a little bit of, balance here or imbalance, if you will. But again, some exciting volleyball happening. But again, we're back to folks traveling across the country, being able to play other teams outside of their conference. So yes, we're back to business as usual.
Okay, but then the first 2 rounds, sorry, I might have asked that question. Is a priority still to kind of keep teams within their 400-mile range or something like that for the first 2 rounds?
So as you may know that we do have, we seed 16, right? And those are our hosts. So sometimes there is a natural, geographical natural to have folks travel to one location. But as we are seeding teams, as we are placing teams in certain regions, we do take into account at some point student athlete experience. So if we do see teams are going to the same region year after year, we do try our best to see, is it possible to get them into another area and go visit somewhere else?
Perfect. Go ahead, Mick.
Yeah, I think that's really good by the committee, because that's been one of the feelings by the athletes of certain teams out there that don't play in the bigger conferences but earn a right to get into the tournament, and they like to have a different experience to have a chance to move forward. So it's funny though, we've said that, and I'll pick Texas State for instance. So they get sent to Texas a lot, but last year in the COVID year, they got sent to Nebraska. I don't know which is worse. And they ended up playing Nebraska in the second round, but they loved the experience. So that's pretty neat. But there are a lot of intricacies that go into putting the teams in the bracket. And is there a reason that you do 10 teams instead of 8? Because you have it kind of a natural 8 valuation here. 8 times 8 is 64. We have 65 or 66 teams in, but when you do a top 10, then that leaves 6 teams that haven't been seeded yet, kind of open for hosting, if that's the way you're going to do it. So what are the ramifications of all of this? And do you tier them? Do you pick the top 5 and then pick the next 5 to get to your 10? Or do you just pick 10 teams and then you kind of rank them?
So the top 10, how we process things, no, it's not necessarily a tiering system, if you will. Sort of how we walk into the room, or Zoom this year around, is we're looking at, who are those teams that, have played well or under consideration. That could be 12, could be 14. You may have 4. We'll sit there and ask each other, hey, who are the teams that are on your list? And there's generally consensus around, the top 2, top 4, wherever that may be. And maybe there's tiering in that regard, that you have consensus among some teams versus others. And then so you start with those top teams that we have consensus on, and then go through our objective criteria. Again, as I talk about your different win-loss records, strength of schedule, RPI, head-to-head if they're available, and common opponents available. So again, not necessarily a tiering system that starts out, but we do start out with who's under consideration. Let's chat about them. Who's consensus? Let's go there, and we go line by line, evaluate each team.
So you mentioned strength of schedule, and it kind of leads me into asking you a question that a couple fans have been asking me to get the know on in. And who are the teams right on the outside, right? Like Joe Lunardi's bracketology, he's got first 4 out, and BYU, right? It's got to be a team that the strength of schedule will just absolutely crush them, no?
So you're right. So as you're looking at, who are those teams that are out, in no particular order at all. We talked about our order of consideration, if you will, were Purdue, Minnesota, BYU, and Washington. So to answer your question, the fan question, there are some that didn't make the cut, and when you compare them to the top 10, it does come down to RPI and strength of schedule, if you will. And those are Purdue, like I said, Minnesota, Washington, BYU.
Now we've got a lot of Big Ten talk, naturally, constantly, great coverage around the country, and a chance for home court for Ohio State, something we saw a few years ago from Pittsburgh, Minnesota. Always seems to be this cloud hovering over. And I wanted to ask one more fan question here with the Big Ten coming in. Is pre-injury results loom large, right? When you guys all sit down and you might talk to the Midwest rack and you talk about the pre-Lauren Stivrins injuries, or even now with Stanford, 3 players are out, they're dropping back-to-back matches. How much do losses without star players factor into this final decision, in the end of November?
Got it. So again, going back to, we've got to be objective, the criteria that we go through. And one of those late season is going into availability of players. While it may not, you may, as we're talking, having conversations about teams, you may say, hey, you know what, that is one that Lauren Stivrins was missing, but how much stock that has into it, it's not going to necessarily keep someone out or in, if you will, as we go into tournament play and we're having those conversations about selections, depending on availability. Again, it wouldn't keep someone out of a tournament, but it may say, hey, that's something to look for.
Here, one last question for you. What's your background, Sherene, right? Why did you want to get into this side of the volleyball world and have to be ridiculed to our conversation?
Well, good conversation, with good people, right? So, but my background is going as far back as I was born in Jamaica, lived in Canada for most of my life, which played volleyball at Duquesne University. At that point, I thought, I was going to go into the business world, practice psychology, if you will. Some way along the way, I attended the NCAA Leadership Conference in Disney, and that sort of sparked my interest. Had some great administrators who had influence over me and said, athletics might be a place for you to be. And I started in the academic side and still there now, but obviously a lover of volleyball and the administrator for women's volleyball at my institution. And so when the opportunity came to be on the NCAA Volleyball Committee, I, said, hey, let's do this.
Wow. And now you're the chair. Thank you so much. And look at that, folks. If you guys have any interest, we've got a ton of AVCA conventions going on in Columbus the weekend of the Final Four. I know Mick's talking at one of them. You're going to have plenty of opportunities to possibly kind of get that first step to become the next Sherene Brantley. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to roll along and talk to Chris Podraza next, the mother of the setter from Ohio State, Mac, and of course, a legend in her own right, coming up next. Joined now by the Minnesota Volleyball Hall of Famer, All-American mom and player, Chris Podraza. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Got to slide that mom and player thing in there, right?
Well, I mean, your daughter is absolutely balling out. Ohio State into the top 10 in our newest AVCA and NCAA top 10 reveal. And, Chris, as a Minnesota alum, but now, of course, repping the C-Bus t-shirt, how much of a volleyball fan outside of watching your daughter play are you, right? Like, how connected are you to the comings and goings of the Big Ten?
I'm as bad as it gets. I'm pretty much a junkie. I mean, I was up this morning, couldn't sleep, watching the Purdue-Wisconsin match. I'm keeping track of all of it. Who's winning and losing. Every conference is a grind. So it's exciting. Who knows who's going to be here in December, because it could be anybody. And, when it comes down to it.
Yeah, perfect timing for Mick and I to start our show this season, because it's the most chaotic season we've had in the last few years. Every single team, it seems like right when they jump up, like Wisconsin falls down. Louisville now has a big target on their back. And with that top 10 coming out, I'm sure you got to get a look at it, especially during that big UCLA showing from Mac and company. What'd you think of it? What were your first couple of reactions from the top 10?
Well, obviously, Ohio State, we're happy to be in the mix. I think anybody's happy to be in the mix. It's still early and a lot can change, but, the earlier you get in, the better it is for each conference. So, we're excited. Having it here in Columbus is huge. And I know the girls are motivated to play in front of a home crowd. It's going to be amazing. Columbus goes crazy for volleyball. So it'll be a sellout. Tickets are already looking a little tough to get. So if you haven't gotten your tickets, get them. But yeah, so I think it's exciting, and I think a lot can change over the next couple of weeks, but we're excited to be there.
I think one thing, I'd love to know about, and I'm sure you've talked to Mac about, is maybe a little added pressure, knowing that we could be that first team to play in our own Final Four, because Minnesota had the chance a few years ago with Seliger Swenson. they got upset by Oregon. And then Pittsburgh, of course, that undefeated run, and they were going to host the Final Four, but they get upset. Do you think that it adds any little bit there this season, or are they just focused on the next match?
I think it's a little bit of both. Obviously, you can't worry about what's happening a month from now, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure it sits in the back of their minds. I know when I was playing at Minnesota and we hosted the Final Four, there was a little team there, Texas. I think Mick might have remembered being there. And we didn't get in. And it was so frustrating sitting there in my arena watching 4 other teams play. So I've definitely said that to our girls and to Mac and her teammates, like, get there. It's so exciting to play in your own city. So yeah, I'm sure it's right there on their minds.
And lastly here for me, watching Louisville and Pittsburgh and Georgia Tech and all these teams from the ACC, right? The conference you don't expect to make all this noise. Do you think that they have what it takes, those 3 in the ACC, to really make a long run here in the tournament?
Yeah, I think one thing that they have going for them, and I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way, but they're not as deep possibly in their conference. So maybe not every single one of their matches is as much of a grind as maybe in the Pac-12 or the Big Ten. But, that's always been the thing. Oh, well, the other conferences, but it's across the board now. It's anybody's game. Kentucky proved that last year when they won the Natty. SEC, Pac, it's all over the place. So there's respect has to be given to everybody.
Yeah, that's for sure. And watching these matches this year has been the most fun. I don't know if it's because the players have gotten an extra year or what, but you're right. The grind and the level of competition has been so good. And in all of the conferences, just not in the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and the conferences you're expecting it. In fact, you start wondering will some of the teams get worn down that are not quite as deep because of this level of competition? And has your daughter said anything about that? Because you can't even go into Rutgers without getting a 5-game match, right?
Right. Well, and she has, she's like, gosh, I think right after the Minnesota match, I talked to her and she was like, I'm tired, and just, she's like, and it's not even so much like I feel tired, but it's long. And, that was the half point of the season. So I know because they played in the spring and, maybe they took time off in the summer, but it's been a long, long road of a lot of volleyball. They talk about the season was shorter in the spring, but it was still, that was a grind. So yeah, I think this super senior situation with these kids that have come back, there's a lot of people really, craving that last opportunity. And I think that's adding to it too.
Yeah, it's been really good. As a parent, you're watching your daughter play. It gets to be 24-24. Are you hiding behind the chair yelling, set so-and-so, or are you just watching? I watched my kids, and when my son played baseball, I had to go behind the bleachers. He would get 3-2, and there'd be bases loaded and 2 outs, and I couldn't watch. I had to just go away. How do you handle it?
I'm sitting in the stands twitching when they're doing things and blocking, and so I can't take my eyes off of it. And it's funny, if somebody tries to have a conversation with me, I can't even hear them. No, I'm pretty dialed in, and don't set that one, set your middle, run your middle, it's across the board.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I think between the two of you, we've got over 60 years of coaching. It's really awesome to just sit here and watch you guys kind of cut it up. And I do have a question here for you when it comes to Ohio. What does volleyball mean to Ohio? I know it's kind of been built there. A lot of the courts and nets and everything come from the area of the imports. And of course, second time to have the Final Four. Is there a little bit of buzz starting? Because I know club volleyball is just so frenzied in the area.
Yeah. And, I coach at a local club here, Mintonette Sports, which, when Mac was a 16-year-old, they won a national championship. And then Londot, her team, they won a national championship. I think the tagline is built here, developed here, and crowned here because, sports imports is here. The OVR region is one of the largest, if not the largest in the country. So, Yeah, I mean, we have quite a few really top club teams or club programs here in Columbus. So there's a lot of talent that comes out of this. Somebody would call us a hotbed for those kids going to college. And yeah, it's exciting to have the Natty here again for the second time.
And then lastly here, is there any sort of mini rivalry? Because I know Indiana kind of brings himself up as like the volleyball capital. They've got a lot of good clubs as well. Minnesota too. You go to Minnesota. Is there any sort of beef between the three, or maybe just two of you guys?
No, you know what? I think there's like a mutual respect, and of course, there's no doubt when a Mincinet team goes up against a Munciana team, or or we're playing TAV out of Texas, or whatever it is, there's definitely a little like, all right, we're coming for you sort of thing. But at the same time, there's tons of respect, and like it's a lot of great fun, and all the memories these kids create in these club programs is incredible. And like it's a great way for all our kids to spend their time.
So being a Hoosier.
What? I didn't know that.
Every time
Come on, every single guy from Muncie looks exactly like we got Craig and Dave.
They do. Shondell, all of them. You're right.
No, every time
Kelly.
I drive across that state line into Ohio, state trooper would pick me up for speeding 1 mile over, and I'm not thinking there's that much respect between the two states there. I would just tell you.
I don't think it's so much with Indiana as it is with that other state up north that we don't talk about here in Ohio.
Well, the Buckeyes took care of them this season. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure you're going to have a blast watching Jen Flynn Oldenburg lead your daughter and that team towards the final stretch. Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
All right,
we're going to jump out across the country and talk now with the Stanford legend, Morgan Hentz. And we wrap up this special NCAA tournament episode with the face of the Final Four from the last few seasons. For us who have been kind of following volleyball mainly in the last 5 years, we know who it is. It's Morgan Hentz, 4-time NCAA Final Four tripper. I guess you could say that way. Morgan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we've done so much talking about this top 10 and about what this entire tournament means for the state of Ohio. And growing up just across the street over in Lakeside Park, Kentucky, you said that you went overseas. You talked to us beforehand, and then you've been kind of practicing in the area in Dayton. So walk me through right off the bat, like, what is volleyball to Ohio? Because I don't think it's a state that a lot of people necessarily connect to volleyball as much as Indiana or California.
Yeah, I think volleyball is a huge sport actually in Ohio, especially for young women. I know volleyball is just on the rise pretty much everywhere, but especially in Ohio, I feel like there are club volleyballs popping up all over the place. But yeah, I remember being at the Final Four in Columbus and having tons of family and friends at the game. And it was just huge to have that support system there. So I think it's always fun when they can host again. And I think it's going to be a great turnout.
Did you ever go to the Final Four before you were a player, just as a fan?
I actually went to the one in Nebraska right before when I was a senior in high school, and it was a blast.
Would you kind of like say that it's an experience for any high school or even college volleyball players who aren't quite in it? Do you think it's an experience that's worthwhile, maybe checking out, I don't know, conventions or just going to the match itself?
Yeah, I totally think it's worth checking out. I think the atmosphere is always super cool, and you just have so many people that love the sport of volleyball. And it's really fun to be around, to have people that share that same passion for the sport.
So you're playing in Germany now, Morgan?
I just got done playing in Germany, and now I'm back home training in the US for a while.
So while you were playing overseas, though, the rules were a little bit different. You didn't get to serve. Is that one of the differences internationally?
Yeah, liberos actually cannot serve internationally. So that was a total shock to me at first, because I'm missing a half rotation of being in the game. But yeah, there's a really big focus on serve receive. So that's a part of my game that I've been working on a ton.
So you played with some pretty heavy hitters at Stanford. they hit the ball pretty hard. So how does the international speed, when you're trying to dig a ball, how does the international speed match up to what you were receiving in practice at Stanford?
Yeah, I think the style of play actually in Germany was a little bit different than playing back in the US. They run sets pretty quickly. There's a heavy emphasis on serving really difficult. And actually the type of ball that is used internationally is different than in the US. They use a Mikasa ball. You may have seen it before. It's purple and yellow and actually moves a little bit differently. So that was a bit of adjustment in terms of serve receive.
And with this experience now, would you recommend other players to go overseas and try this, or would you tell them to stay in the States?
I think it totally depends on the person. I think it's a really cool opportunity if you want to keep playing and to explore a new part of the world. Then go overseas. It can be a really cool experience. I went during COVID, so I think my experience was a little strange. But yeah, if you want to go explore a part of the world, what a great way to do it and still play volleyball. And I'm really hoping here that volleyball keeps blooming professionally in the US.
Yeah, we have 2 leagues coming now, so you'll have some options. It'll be pretty neat. We'll see where the best paycheck comes from.
Yeah, exactly.
So Morgan, taking a look at your experience, right? As a freshman going to the Final Four, walk me through the differences throughout the years, because you win it all as a freshman and I'm sure it was so overwhelming, but then to not get crowned the sophomore year and have to come back as a veteran, what were the differences between 2016 and kind of 2018, 2019 in the Final Four for you?
Yeah, I think for 2016, my class and I we say it all the time. We were pretty naive going into the tournament and we didn't realize how much weight was on it. And in a way, ignorance was bliss a little bit. We were like, oh, this is super fun. And like, I think that following year, sophomore year, we definitely put a bit more pressure on ourselves. And I don't think that helped when we got to the Final Four. But we learned from it. I think that loss to Florida for us in 2017 in the Final Four was necessary for our success down the line in 2018 and 19. And I think when it came to 2018 and 19, our mindset was just one step at a time, be in the moment, and just be absolutely present.
Well, the most incredible part is you actually had the most digs in the Final Four your freshman year, 54 in the 2 matches. And then I think 52 as a junior and 50 or 40-ish, I think, as a senior. So it's crazy how, as a naive libero or defensive specialist, the numbers were a little bit ratcheted up there.
Yeah, that I actually didn't know that.
I was going to say, Morgan, you have to ask him who keeps track of stuff like that.
We do, the broadcasters.
Yeah. Fun to look back on those things now. Yeah, I think actually, like, as I was going through my 4 years, like the speed of the game changed. I saw a lot of offenses like trying to run more tempo. And so there wasn't as many higher sets. So it's really fun to see how the game continues to change and evolve.
And then last question for you here, with so much parity around the country and, you know, all these fans that maybe never had the chance to go to the Final Four, right? Louisville fans and Pittsburgh fans and Georgia Tech fans. We talked so much ACC in this episode. Do you think that the more inexperienced defensive specialists may actually be able to step up more because there's less overthinking? Could that be one thing that you can piece together?
Yeah, I think I do love how much parity there is in the sport, and it's very evident this year in collegiate volleyball. I think it's just totally dependent on like teams' cultures, like how do you handle pressure, how poised can you be in the moment, and how much can you just play with joy. I think all those things together lead to success eventually.
Great, thank you so much for joining us, Morgan.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Morgan.
Don't forget, you can get tickets now. You know, Chris teased it, so you might want to hurry up. Tickets as low as $30 on Thursday, $35 for Saturday. You can get 4 packs or group tickets available on NCAA.com/volleyball. We're going to wrap up this episode. He's Mick, she's Morgan, I'm Daniel, and this is 6 Rotations.